Everybody, welcome back to the Gray Maybe podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the podcast, I'm really glad you chose this episode to tune into. And if you're a familiar listener of the podcast, I'm really glad you're coming back. And I always appreciate all of the referrals that you guys are giving, and anyone who's coming back and keeps listening. I appreciate it so much. Today, I have a really cool guest. This is someone who I met through actually just performing, and she has helped me create a really big project in my life that hasn't been released yet. We're still working on that. We'll talk a bit about it. But she is a multifaceted artist. When I think of her, I'm kind of like, there's nothing she can't do. She's someone who's kind of been able to have her hands in everything. And there's like that saying, a jack of all trades, master of none, but not a master of none, like a master of all the trades. Because if you can do them, to me, that's a master. If you're successful in them, you could do them, that's a master to me. So today, my guest is Mēsha Kussman. Oh my God. Kussman.
Yeah.
Yikes. Mēsha Kussman. I'm not starting off well. Mēsha has been helping me create this project. We did a short film. She saw me perform at Congress, a show pre-pandemic, and she had asked me if we wanted to put this on film, and she helped me do all of that. She directed it. She edited it. She has submitted it. She has compressed files. She has made many phone calls. She has done many things. She kept getting me to ask questions that I didn't want to ask because I'm not good at asking for things, but she's really good at asking for things and also being totally fine if they're not available, which I had to watch and learn from her. And she's a mother, and has several companies, and she's a dancer and a choreographer and a synchro company owner and director, and she's all the things. So Mēsha.
Oh, thank you.
Anything you want to add to all the things?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say about working with you and meeting you and being drawn to you, seeing you perform first before even having a conversation with you. I love our film.
Mm-hmm.
I love how it explores authenticity and claims that authenticity is central to transforming trauma into power. And I see you do that in everything that you do, your podcast, this film we've made together. And so I'm grateful to be here and to support your voice and the community of people that you bring together. I am a filmmaker and a choreographer, currently residing in Los Angeles, which is where I founded Aqua Lilies, which is a water ballet entertainment company. We do TV, film, music videos, as well as, of course, live events. I choreographed Scarlett Johansson in the Coen brothers' Hail Caesar. My company was featured in Black is King, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and music videos for Lizzo, Justin Bieber, Missy Elliott. My career is, I would say, is focused on the convergence of strength and grace with a particular interest in female empowerment. So
yes,
there you have it.
I agree with all of that. And I just want to let her talk because I do love listening to how Mēsha digests information and kind of talks about it. I've always thought of you as just such a multifaceted artist, right? Like when I think of an artist, everything that I think, how you approach everything is art based. And it doesn't matter if it is business. It doesn't matter if it's, so much of the projects we get to do, quote unquote, that are artistic are business in nature, right? It's industry in nature. So at the forefront of it, it's always going to be serving the money master and serving the who's in charge of telling the story master. Yeah. So as creative types, it's always really difficult sometimes to get that art in or to even feel open enough to approach something as an artist, because by the time you get to put your hands in it, it's so stale and stagnant usually. So, but I always feel like that doesn't even affect you. You're just art and like all art and let's go art and let's get the art in. So I was really like fortunate to get to meet you and have someone like you be like, hey, let's do this. Let's put this on film. And like she said, we aren't sure how we're going to release it yet, but we are getting closer and closer to doing that. So stay tuned, I guess.
Posted.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted. But today, and in this season, I'm having Mēsha on because my dad passed in April of at the end of April of 2023, and I know that Mēsha, since I met her, since we first started having meetings pre-pandemic about doing this film, she was struggling with the somewhat maybe rapid decline of her parents' health. Both of them had 2 different ailments, and she had spoken to me a little bit here and there about some of those struggles. And so when I lost my father, in between that and me losing my father, you had lost your father.
Yeah,
right?
My dad passed in February of 2020, so like right before the lockdown.
Right before lockdown. Yikes, grief on top of grief. And then you lost your mother really recently, like after I lost my father.
Super recently. That's why, I didn't know that this next chapter of the podcast was about grief, and naturally it makes so much sense given that you're like a mistress of authenticity. So like, have at it. Here we are. But this is kind of the definitely first public forum in which I've spoken about at least grief as it relates to my mom's passing. She passed away May 7th. So that's like 2 months ago.
Yeah. And I remember when I had told you my dad had passed, you were like, my mom's really kind of there. You could feel that was coming.
And she had Alzheimer's. So she's been kind of passing. And actually, it's interesting to examine what passing is, as it relates to grief and illness, and then the actual like death of a person. But I think there's kind of phases, at least with Alzheimer's, with passing. It kind of happens gradually. So I've been losing her for a while, really since the diagnosis in 2019. So mother diagnosed with Alzheimer's 2019, dad passes away in 2020, pandemic. It's been a monster of a couple of years for me.
Yeah, I relate to that for sure. And I think anybody else who, I just feel like a lot of people have been getting kind of what we would call like compound grief, right? It's just thing after thing after thing. I relate to you talking about watching your mom kind of, slowly kind of phase into that next chapter, whatever that is, the decline of health. My dad had PSP, which is supranuclear palsy, degenerative supranuclear palsy, which is a brain disorder. It is actually it has a dysfunction like Alzheimer's or like Parkinson's, where it's a buildup of a tau protein in the brain that the body can't seem to get rid of, and it causes your motor skills to not work one by one, and slowly
that get fairly similar.
Yes,
I don't know much
right?
about it, but it's
Yeah, because Alzheimer's, I don't think everybody always knows who doesn't have someone close to them that's gone through Alzheimer's. It's not just they don't know who you are. It is also very debilitating in the body with some people. Like their whole system starts shutting down.
Yeah, it happens slowly over time, but eventually they lose their motor skills, their ability to eat, swallow, walk. I mean, a lot of people end up dying because they forget how to swallow.
Yes.
Certainly all the basic self-care stuff like cooking for yourself, doing your own laundry, like those are the kind of the first things. And that, at least for my mom, started to coincide with, her memories. And then she really remembered things from her deep childhood.
Interesting.
The longest. Yeah. And so even though she actually died in the home that I grew up in, which she had for 50 years, but when she got back from the hospital, it was COVID that took her out. But she was so feeble from the Alzheimer's that's why she was vulnerable to dying from COVID. That she got back to her house and I said, Mom, are you glad to be home? And she said, well, this isn't my house. It's very nice, very nice room, because I think she was referring to the house she'd grown up in.
Right.
So yeah, so what was left at the end, and she was at the beginning of what's called advanced stage Alzheimer's when she died, were really her childhood memories and the people from her childhood. And I was sometimes included in that set and sometimes not.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And did she think you were someone else from her childhood? Or
she almost always saw me as like a very nice, approachable, friendly person who was helping her, but she didn't always know that I was her daughter, and not towards the end. So when we talk about grief, I mean, there's like, the person is no longer in their body and I can't hold her hand or touch her. But before she died, for sure, our relationship had already changed, and I had, for example, grieved my inability to ask her for advice, for example, or lean on her in that way. But I will offer, for those of you who might be in a similar situation with Alzheimer's or otherwise, that I spent a lot of time resisting the change, and I also spent some of the time allowing myself to notice what was there in the space it left behind. And what I mean by that is I let different ways of connecting with her be available to us. And that actually kind of filled me up.
Could you give an example?
Well, our engagement became less linguistic because she just wasn't able to formulate sentences and words the way she would try, and she'd get frustrated and just kind of give up. And then that was really hard to watch because I would know she was wanting to say something and just couldn't. But instead of trying to like force her to figure it out, or Mom, you were just saying this, like try, or something like that, which would not work. I guess I became, like, out of necessity, kind of a master of letting go. And so that brought us into the present moment. You know what I mean? So it became less about being attached to the way things had been and more about, like, what did it feel like physically to be with her in that moment right there? And that's been a lot of my practice lately in general, is like, how can I be with, like, what is happening right here? That's one of the things I'm trying to, you said before, like, I'm an artist and, like, committed to being an artist. And, like, for me, the way I define that is, like, I'm trying to ride the edge of, like, being conscious of what I'm aware of growing through right now. And so, and of course, expressing that, right? So I'm trying to be really conscious right now of the gifts I learned from this experience with her, which is that the way I think things should be isn't necessarily going to be any more fulfilling than the way things actually are in this moment, as this moment leads to the next moment, leads to the next moment.
Yeah, that's big. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? Like, as you describe it, it's like, oh, well, that sounds beautiful and, like, great. And, like, so right. Like, oh, of course, that's how you do it. But, like, to have to imagine letting go to giving up to let go, right, of what your expectations are, and then moving into this unknown territory, like, that's a hard idea to apply. But I think it's absolutely the only way to go. Leaning into that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I saw my dad start to kind of decline in ways that I wasn't comfortable with. But I only saw him like twice a year. So it was more like, I guess it was probably more prevalent to me because I could see the decline, whereas my brother and my mom were kind of seeing him day in and day out. And I don't know if they noticed it the same as me, because it took a while for us to get a diagnosis on what he had. And his symptoms were coinciding with life events. So some of his speech and his problems with his mouth, well, he was being fitted for dentures at the same time. So it was like you couldn't really tell what that problem was. His gait and his mobility being a problem. Well, he had both had his knees done one at a time. So it had kind of masked that. One of the craziest things is he just stopped drinking one day. He just stopped, like cold turkey. This man has drank his whole life.
Wow.
He's smoked cigarettes his whole life, and he just stopped. And my mom was like, "Isn't it so great?" And I was like, "Yes, but what?" Like, I was like, "This is very strange." And it wasn't like yeah, I've really been thinking I don't need this stuff anymore. It was nothing like that. It was just like, stop. And that is a hallmark of that disease is sudden personality changes, sudden habit changes. And which also is like, if you think about it, that means there's something in the brain that you could turn on or off or adjust, and it could make addiction literally not a problem.
Wow.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we could figure out what that is without the negative effects of what that disease is, but if we could pinpoint what that was in a way, like, that would be amazing.
It would be.
That'd be amazing. So there were those things, and then watching him decline every time I saw him was really, really rough. And my dad and I had a complicated relationship, which I've said a bit on this podcast already. And so I had time to kind of clean up my side of the street. That was important to me early on anyways, because I started to kind of begrudgingly accept that the relationship I wanted to have with my dad was probably never going to happen. And I think a lot of children of addicts or mental illness, things like that, or if there's like some kind of like, you know, like, for lack of a better word, dysfunction, like in that relationship, like at a certain point, like I think the child will continuously forever try to have that relationship that they think they want or need. To the point where it's like detrimental, and like instead of like, okay, I'm just not gonna, this is probably not gonna happen, and accept that for what that is. And almost, I remember grieving that in addition to,
I so relate.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, yes, like you grieve not just like the loss of them in their bodies, but you also grieve like your chance to have made it different while they were alive.
Yes.
And also, it's not like you could have necessarily done that, right? If you could have, you would have. So no,
right.
You know, but like time, like it's time. You know what I mean? Like game over,
and that's your time.
And that's your time. Yeah. So that's that means like acceptance comes into focus. One of the things, I don't want to interrupt you if you were still talking on that, but I have something I'd love to share that I've been thinking about in relation to that is like, it just, it's like, I don't know. Now I've kind of lost the thought. Okay, you continue and I'll
continue, and maybe it'll spark. I'm gonna. In recovery rooms too, there is a lot of discussion about mourning the relationship you wish you had with a parent, or mourning the way that you wish you could have been parented. And it's so prevalent in the recovery rooms usually because there's usually active addiction or some kind of other family dysfunction. But I think that it's a gift to like look at that, acknowledge it, and be able to kind of work through it. Because I think so many children, and this can be adult children, don't ever even realize that they might need to grieve what they wish they had, and that sometimes that is the torture in there, you know. And you had said yourself, you're like, that acceptance, like that accepting that is kind of major. Is there anything that you find surprising about grief? And this doesn't have to be specific to the two griefs you just mentioned, but just like it can be in general.
Surprising. I think like how fucking hard it is.
Right.
Like it's really, really hard.
It's a consistent little fucker.
It's a motherfucker. Yeah. And I happen to be like in a good swell. Like I'm in a kind of a good moment. Only, well, my mom passed away on May 7th, and then I buried her ashes just, I guess, 2 weeks ago. So there was a memorial service, and then I I buried her ashes with her mother, which was her wish. But that period between when she died, which included her memorial service, and then until the burial of her cremated remains was so vulnerable for me. Mm. And I did not know that it wouldn't be like that always. I just thought this is the new normal. I feel like I've just been like flung out of an airplane. I have no backpack. There's no parachute. I'm like everyone else is going about life like totally normally. I will never be the same. I will never be able to connect with these people. I have no idea if my reactions to everyday things are like, you know, I just felt like I was living on another plane. I was living in another universe. And then there was a shift, and then something about burying her ashes in the ceremony. And I'm such a proponent of ceremony. Like if there's no ceremony set up, find your ceremony. Like just ask, what can I do to provide ceremony for this, you know, and create that for yourself, because there is something to the mystical and the magical. And that doesn't mean it has to come out of left field. It can come from inside, and it can be like, oh, well, we always used to eat like hot dogs at, you know, or like whatever it was, you know what I mean? And like do the thing. But I have felt so much relief since the burial, since being with her family and my family, the bloodline, and laying the box in the ground with her mother. And then like I started to be able to breathe again and like feel normal again. Like feel like I was a physical body in a material world rather than like an ethereal body, like trying to live in a normal place with traffic and stoplights and computers and phones. And I was just like, I can't handle this, you know, because my thoughts were so much bigger than life, and everybody else was just, it was a Tuesday. So I feel really grateful to be quite a bit more grounded now. And then when you asked me if I wanted to do the podcast, I was like, yes, like, girl, you're in the present. This is the lesson. Say yes. And then like the couple of hours, days before this, I was like, motherfucker. Like,
why did I say yes?
I'm going to have to.
Why did I say yes?
Grief. I'm going to have to talk about grief. But ironically, when I was like really in the, like, I describe it as almost like a thread that someone's pulled on, like a harp string.
Yep. A pluck.
Like my whole system was like,
yeah.
And so now I just feel like the vibrations like come to the center in a calm way. That I felt super out of control. So I had some anxiety that I would feel out of control again by talking about it. But I actually think part of what made me feel out of control was the fact that I couldn't talk about it. That this thing that was so real for me, because I actually walked my mom to the doorstep. I was the person who was with her when she retreated from the material world. Like I was there for her for the days beforehand. And that was a really powerful experience, which actually reminded me a lot of my experiences birthing both of my children. Like I think of it as like coming close to the portal, right? Like the entrance, the exit, like the close to the portal. And also with the births of my daughters, I also felt like I had an experience where I was like, where's the circle? Like, we got to sit down and we got to talk about this. Like, right. I got to tell you what happened. I got to tell you what I saw. Like, I got to talk about this. And culturally, that just doesn't exist. Definitely the memorial service was a piece of it, and the burial was a piece of it. But I think I also felt really vulnerable and alone because I didn't know how to talk about what I had experienced. And yeah, like I said, there was the loss of her because she was ill. And that was also very lonely. That was hard to talk about. And maybe I should have been in more support groups around Alzheimer's. But the actual like death part is a secondary, separate thing. Oh, now I remember what I blanked on when we were talking.
Give it to me.
It's such a fresh idea that I feel like I'm like, hold on, don't you go away again. which is that it's really hard to begrudge a dead person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard.
Yeah.
And I am trying to hold space in myself for the part of me that's like, I love everything about this person, and the part of me that's like, and I was sometimes disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Disappointed in what I didn't get, and also disappointed in what I didn't give.
Mm.
Like that can't be undone or redone. Not in the material world. Like
Right.
maybe some other way.
Right.
So that relates to what you were saying for me, to like about your dad, because yeah, I'm trying to remember why that came on the tail of what you were saying, but it felt really right at the time.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's absolutely all in line with everything. I relate to that need to kind of share that experience of what happened, because I was also there as my dad took his last several breaths. Not to be morbid or to freak anybody out, but it's not always just one last breath. It's like one last breath and then several uncomfortable minutes of nothing where you think they're gone and then they gasp again. And that keeps happening sometimes. And it almost can become morbidly comedic because it's like, right. Like you're like, and they're left, they're free. And then a gasp and you're like, oh, and it's just morbid and weird and also kind of funny because, you know, it feels practical jokey a little bit, like you're underestimating this person. At least that's how it kind of felt with my dad a little bit, because he was kind of a scrapper. So it felt a little on brand, you know. But there was like, you know, I haven't mentioned this in the interviews I've done already, as in the process of this podcast, but a couple, let's see, I want to say like once we got my dad from the hospital to the hospice place, that night, my mom and my brother went to go grab some things from the house. And I said, hey, grab some of Dad's favorite DVDs, like grab Princess Bride, grab some of the things that he's always made jokes about over the years, things that have been kind of like family jokes or, you know, whatever. And we can play, because they had a TV, you could play the DVDs, you can play music, whatever. And so they came back and my brother's like, oh, I couldn't find the DVDs that, you know, you requested. And my mom was kind of like, oh, it's inappropriate anyways. It's inappropriate. And I was like, what? And she's like, it's inappropriate right now under the circumstances. I was like, it's inappropriate to play Dad's favorite movies right now. And she was like, yes. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, I'm not going to sit here just waiting for him to die. That's my anxiety cannot take that. I'll tell you that right now. Like, yeah. That's not going to happen. So I just started watching a movie on my phone. And, you know, that was that. And then the next day we had gone home, went to sleep, came back, and one of the nurses was in there. She was really sweet and she was talking, you know, to my brother and my mom and I, and we were waiting for the chaplain to come because during the night while we had left, there was some kind of like he was having some apnea, which is kind of what they say, okay, it's getting closer now, because he was completely drugged up the entire time once we took him from the hospital. And so we were waiting for the chaplain. The nurse is in there talking to me, my mom, and my brother. And all of a sudden the TV flips on and it's starting to flip through the channels of the TV. And I'm like, oh my God, my brother is so rude. I cannot believe he just turned this TV on and he's like flipping channels while the nurse is in there. And I look at his hands. He's got nothing in his hands, no remote. He's not looking at the TV. He's looking at the nurse. And I'm looking at my mom and she's got no remote and she's talking to the nurse. And I'm looking at the nurse and the nurse is talking to them. And I look at the corner table and the remote's sitting on the corner table. And this TV is just flipping channels. And my mom is asking me, she's like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, you guys don't notice the TV is just like on and flipping channels? And they all turn around and look and they're like kind of confused. And it stops on Law and Order for a couple seconds. And then it starts flipping again and everyone's watching it flip. And then it stops on this channel where people are just wiping out. like just like bikes down hills, wipe out, like people getting hit in the nuts, like just like all these like accidents that ever, like funniest home videos, but like the tragic edition, you know, like where people are just, you know, yeah. And it stayed there. And I was like, well, I'm not going to change the channel or turn it off. And nobody else wanted to either. My mom was like, you know, have you had problems with these TVs turning on like this? Like, is this something that happens? And the nurse was like, no. But she's like, but these things happen here a lot.
Wow.
And, you know, everyone was kind of like, okay, you know, like that's what it is. And so, yeah, there's something that, and when that happened, I was like, okay, cool. So he's gone. Like he did his thing. Like if you're, I fully believe that that was energetically something he had contributed to. And I was, after that, I was totally cool with whenever he wanted to peace out. And I didn't feel like he was really there anymore. My dad was also really big into electronic fixing things being able to TV, but also like remotes thing, you know, like that kind of thing. Electricity was kind of something that he knew a bit about. He wasn't an electrician, but he was able to kind of like work in those, you know, teach himself that type of stuff. So it just seemed to me very like on brand, part of how that would all go down. And so when he actually did die, you know, it was sad, it was weird, it was morbid, it was all the things, but it felt very also like the last chapter. It was like, you know, more like this was the last thing that needed to happen, but that it was already done. You know, it didn't feel like it felt like he was like, I don't know if there's a you're here or you're not. It could be like a slow drain battery, or it could be like a 98% battery is gone, that 2% is left, and that 2% is just bodily.
Yeah. And also when you witness someone die, you're like, you are not your body.
Yeah.
It is so plain.
Yeah.
When you were talking earlier about he's not breathing up and he's back and he's breathing, you know, like my mom too, the way her body like kind of broke, like it's almost like a car that's like breaking down, like you know, just a week beforehand, even though her brain was ill from Alzheimer's, you know, she had a brain disease, her strength and her energy, even if she was not able to like walk or be as physical, like her body over time was dying. That didn't change who she was or the energy she had. I mean, it's the same as like when we get sick, like we feel, but we're still who we are. So,
I'm more bitchy. It just, you know, amplifies
when you're in good health.
Yeah. Just just knocks it up or down, but it's the same level. Yeah.
Full on. Yeah. So like, you know, it's weird to watch the encasement of someone's spirit just collapse or break or decay, you know. It's a weird thing. It's weird because it's not common. It was a very uncommon experience. When my dad died, he died of cancer. And I was there to witness his decline and kind of I was there with him to the point where he was like, it's not happening. Like I'm not gonna, it's a battle. Cancer's a battle. And he fought a lot. And then there was a moment where he was like, uncle, basically.
Yeah. I'd like to relax now. Yeah.
I'm just not going to be able to get up. Yeah, like I've been pinned. And from that point on, it's funny that I'm getting emotional because I guess I've been more preoccupied with my mom. But I wasn't there after that moment, but I felt like I played a really important role because his wife, my stepmom, who was the love of his life, he had to tell her that he was done. And I was there with him when she went away. She went home to take a shower. And when he woke in the morning, he said, where's Kim? So I was the role I played, or I don't know if I was playing a role, if I just happened to be there at the time where he made the choice, that he was going to let go. And I kind of saw that with my mom also. She had COVID, so I was, I wasn't with her. I have 2 kids, and I didn't want to risk getting COVID and giving it to my kids. And I got her out of the hospital and got her home, and she had a nurse, and was trying to buy myself some time before she was, to be with her when she was a little less infectious. And anyways, I was on the phone with her, and they pumped her with so many fluids at the hospital that it was hard to tell. She seemed like quite healthy, actually, when she got home. But she hadn't eaten in a week. She refused to eat the hospital food. Anyways, it was a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. During those 3 days, the way her tongue moved in her mouth, it wasn't operational, and it wasn't right. And so I actually, through FaceTime, on Wednesday, I was like, she's going to die.
Yeah.
And so I flew to San Francisco right away. But before I could get there, I had this song. And this speaks, I think, a little bit to that kind of magical thing you're talking about like, why did the TV flip? And like these things that make so much sense that don't make like normal sense, but they like make more sense than normal sense when you're in these scenarios. Anyways, a friend of my mom's and mine had sent me this song. It's a song by Kate Wolf. I'm forgetting the name of it at the moment, but it will come to me. And Medicine Wheel. And it basically, I was like, I need her to hear this song, because I just felt like she needed to hear it, because I felt like she must also be in a position where she knows that something's going to happen. So I felt it. She felt it. I just felt this. And so the nurse played it for her. And then the nurse told me that she wanted to listen to it over and over again. It's a song about letting go of ego and embracing like the nature of things. It's very like Toltec. It's a lot of Toltec wisdom. And anyways, listen to the song. Anyways, so I ended up singing this song a cappella at her memorial service, which is something like I've never sang in public before, let alone a cappella.
Okay, wait, no, hold on. Press a pause, because first of all, people thought I was insane for speaking at my dad's funeral, for like giving a eulogy. Like everyone tried to stop me from doing, not everyone, but my mom didn't want me to, the priest tried to get me not to, because they were like, oh, it'll be so emotional and it's so hard to do and it's so this and it's so that. My brother was the only one that was like, hey, she gave a great speech at my wedding. Like, I don't know why you guys are tripping, essentially.
Also,
like,
she's an amazing writer. Yeah.
Thank you. And I did. And I practiced it so that I practiced so that I could, it was really important for me to say the message of what I wrote and tell the stories. I didn't need to tell my emotion. I needed to tell the stories.
Totally.
And so like, it was really important for me to get it out clearly so that none of that story or that information would be lost on evoking the feelings that I had or in other people. I was like, I just need to be clear. But so it's not about me though, in this instance, because you were like, hold my beer. Like, I'm going to sing. Okay. So first, the hardest thing to do is to speak in front of people. The second hardest thing to do is speak at a funeral. The third hardest thing would be to sing a song in front of people. The fourth hardest thing would be sing a song at a funeral.
Acapella. No, it was insane.
Acapella.
I by the way, I could absolutely never have done it at her burial. So I was with her when she died. I had an experience because I watched that transformation happen, where I felt so connected, and I felt like I just trust in the way of things that I was able to be just, and I said to myself the whole way there, I was like, I might sing this. Like I heard a voice, it was a voice. I was like, I'm prepared to sing this song. I actually, to memorize the words of the song, I choreographed a dance to the song. If I had really been like brave, I would have sung
you could have done that.
while dancing.
Is that like, that's the fifth level, is a full triple threat situation?
No, it's so interesting because actually after she passed, I was like, maybe I'll film a dancer like dancing this choreographed thing. I'll sing it. And I started building the whole thing. And then I was just like, actually, maybe I'll just like lay down for hours because I'm so fucking tired.
The intersection of creativity and rest and reality after grief. Yeah.
Yeah. I could 100%, I couldn't even speak at her burial. So it wasn't like, this is like not an ego thing. It wasn't like I was like, finally my chance to like sing. All these people are here. It wasn't like that at all. You know, it was just like, I happened to be in a position where, and I wasn't even to the last minute. I was like, you can bail at any time. You do not have to. But I found myself learning the lyrics by choreographing a dance to the lyrics and then practicing them in the dark, like at night when the kids were asleep, until I got, and then I spoke a eulogy as well, because like you, I didn't know if anyone else at the funeral was going to tell stories about my mom.
Yes.
And I wanted not people to know my mom, because people who were there, most of them know her. Obviously they were all affected enough by her to be there. And there were a lot of people there. It was beautiful. But I just wanted to like be familiar with them about her. And so even the writing of that, my intention was so clear. So even the writing of that just came boop, 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 and then like turned it boop, boop, and like I made a couple, like I barely edited it. It just was like, blah. And then I was like, okay. And then also the song and my need to send the song when I sent it, and my sort of gratitude but lack of surprise when the nurse told me she had to listen to it a couple of times over. And then I did. I sang the song and it felt normal and it felt right. And then when the weeks went by between the memorial and the burial, and then I got to the burial, and like, I was so fragile by that point. I mean, I had like a couple of I had to have an emergency root canal.
Oh, hell no.
After like, it was like the worst pain upon the worst pain. So I do feel like there's been like a little bit of a domino of like brutal pain in my life for the last couple of years. And I'm really looking forward to like, this isn't actually normal. This is not, I mean, I feel like I can sympathize and empathize with people who've been through like a trauma that's lasting, you know? And I really want, I'm just putting it out there, universe, like, give me all the good stuff. Give me like the chocolate sundae with the extra sprinkles. I need all the good stuff.
Yeah, right, I want that. I want that too.
Yeah. And I think it's coming. I'm ready. I'm really, yeah. And I feel a shift after the burial. I feel a release. And it's also, I also have a little bit of a narrative going where I'm like, what? Like, what the hell just happened? Like, I had both my parents in the last 3 years. What the fuck? That was like so much, so fast.
Yeah.
With the pandemic included. But at least with the pandemic, my brothers and my stepmom, we could all grieve my dad's passing in a pod. We met regularly and nothing was normal. So that was helpful. Yeah.
What else is there anything else that's kind of helped you in your process that you could say, or
I think
that stands out?
Yeah, I think what I would tell other people that I wished I had known when the grief was acute, which it's bound to be again because it's only been 2 months. is just like, give it the time it needs. I can say it's not going to last forever. The height of the grief is not going to last forever. I think that with my dad, for example, it's been 3 years. I mean, you just heard me cry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very real sadness just now about him, or his death. But it doesn't happen as frequently.
Mm-hmm.
It happens just as strong when it happens, but there's space, more and more space in between. So I would just say, like, even though it feels like you're gasping for air, like you keep getting pushed under and you need to come up, like eventually you'll go under less frequently.
Yeah, that makes sense. That feels a lot like, that's like a great analogy. I've heard different analogies over time and space about it. I think that's like a really good analogy. It's like the space and time before you get dunked. Again, like the dunking will still be shitty, but you'll have more time above air, before you get dunked again.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can think of off the top of your head that, like, well, that didn't help, like that wasn't unhelpful, anything that you did that was unhelpful, or that was offered to you that was unhelpful?
I think that there's a kind of like a social cultural misconception that being busy is helpful. And sometimes it is. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're spiraling on a negative thought, like changing the subject is helpful. But grief is like, you wouldn't say to like a hungry baby, like, suck it up and like, let's play with these toys instead,
Right. Look over here. This will make you full.
you just be like, feed the crying baby, So I guess, and that's advice I can give myself now, is like, feed the crying baby, and she will get full eventually, and she'll fall asleep in your arms, and then you can relax a little bit. But like, denying yourself what you need because you think that, somehow you're going to muscle your like way through it by being tough. Mm-hmm. That's just, in my experience, not how grief works.
I think it's also
it needs softness and
yeah,
generosity and time, which God knows we all feel like we could use more of. It needs patience. Grief needs like gentleness and like willingness and like listening and like forgiveness.
Yeah. And I think because we don't really have a good blueprint with how to deal with grief, and we don't like to discuss it in society, we don't like to admit mortality or really deal with it in any kind of a healthy manner, it seems almost like a really great coping strategy to just get busy and move on, right? Because that's avoidance. And if you are avoidant to things, like, that seems really attractive. But like you said, I don't think that's super effective. And I do think that, like, you're buying borrowed time in essence. Like, that will catch up. Like, there is no shortcut. Like, there's no way around it. There's only through it. If there was a shortcut, we would totally give it to you and tell someone. And
pill form.
Yes. And that's what I've said in other podcasts. Like, if there was a pill, and I've actually started saying this in general, of like, when I'm mentoring and helping dancers, because obviously the goal is to be the best dancer, or become a professional dancer, or have a professional career. And there's a lot of people who make really good money selling this idea that they know the secrets to how you could get there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, that would be great. Like, how much would you pay me if I had a pill? How much would you pay me if I said, take this pill twice a day for 3 weeks and you'll have a professional dance career? Or insert whatever thing you want, right? Mm-hmm. If I, like, how much would you pay?
To be fit, or
anything, whatever it is you want. If I had a pill for it, how much would you pay? And the answer is usually, how much is it? Because I would fucking pay that. And the thing, and the thing is like, I don't though. And that's the whole point.
That is the whole point. That's life. That's living. I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking of a yoga expression, tapas, which is like heat, energy, effort, it's the effort is actually, it's so funny. I have this quote on my desktop: satisfaction lies in the effort, not in the attainment. It's a quote from Gandhi.
Well, clearly that's not someone who's ever wanted something bad enough. No, I'm just kidding.
Apparently.
Say it again. Read it again for us. Read it again for myself. Read it one more time.
Satisfaction lies in the effort, not in the attainment. Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh my God, I'm so attainment focused.
Well, also, yeah, I mean, you're American.
There's no way to escape this capitalistic hellscape. Yes. So all of that I agree with. I love the sayings too. We spoke a little bit, like we touched a little bit on like some mythical things. Is there anything you want to add about like a spiritual belief system you might have, or any other unexplained mystical, magical stuff around grief or loss?
I, for me, would say, like, just kind of like, fuck it, like whatever rule books you've gone by when they were living, whoever it is you're grieving, or it's not a person, it's a thing you expected would happen that isn't, or something that was happening that no longer is, or whatever it is. Like rule book wise, like just, I don't know, for me with the loss of my parents, I can speak mostly about how I've recovered, in quotes, from my dad dying, is like when it was really bad, I just was like, oh, I still talk to him. Like I'm going to make up a whole new manual for like, and there certainly are other cultures in which like we're confined by our inheritance, our cultural inheritance, but there's, and I am very interested in exploring other ways in which other kinds of people think about communing. I'm really interested in exploring like ancestry and not ghosts so much. Like, because to me, that's also just like a way of materializing the spirit. Like, oh, it's a spirit, but it's a ghost, because that's material. But like something else, like I would just like to blow the roof off of it, and so I feel like there's a bit of an invitation for me to explore that, and also like, oh, cuckoo nut job, like Mēsha right now, but also fuck off, because I need that actually in order to like make it like good, like make this living feel juicy. Like I feel tired of the walls and the lines and the corners and the deadlines and all the things. And I am a little bit more interested at the moment in what does the breeze have to say, and like being in nature, and like, and so, yeah, when my dad died, it was like unbearable for me. And it would come up in these weird ways. Like I would be fine, and then I would spot his jacket in the closet, and it would be like, but then I would like go into the closet and hug the jacket. And I was like, and I would be crying in the closet, hugging his jacket, and be like, and then I would just like feel him there, like not in the jacket. Or I would just, even just like in this moment, if I'm like, my dad's here right now and my mom's here, I can feel like a little bit cool about that.
Yeah, I actually, when I had the experience of the TV coming on and the channels would be blah, 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 what it kind of, the undercurrent of that message for me was kind of like, oh yeah, you're not there anymore. You're kind of everywhere now. And that's kind of how it felt, was like, you're in the electricity, you're in like the things, this is next level. Like this is different. And, it kind of like, my dad was nonverbal for the last few years of his life because of the disease. And unfortunately, you know, it made it really hard to advocate for himself. We didn't know if he was in pain. We didn't know, you know, it was really hard to find where he was in all of this. But my dad had a really sharp tongue. And, you know, growing up, there were a lot of, he could be very hurtful. He could be very rageful. And there were a lot of things he said that were not only not politically correct, but also just very hurtful. And so for me, in the end, it was actually a bit bittersweet because he couldn't say the things that were hurtful. He could only smile when he saw me. He kind of could only reach his arms up for a hug. He was very receptive of love and just was kind of like pretty smiley. You know, and it was a different, there's my dad I grew up with, my dad who I knew as an adult, and my dad when he got sick. And those are kind of three, well, I say I'm leaving one part out. My dad before Rush Limbaugh, my dad after Rush Limbaugh into my adulthood, and my dad when he got sick. And those are three completely different people.
Wow.
And I have three different memories to categorize him in those ways. But so, you know, him not being able to speak later, you know, and you know, once that experience with the TV happened and it felt like he was kind of everywhere. It kind of felt more like, oh, right now I can always, you know, I can say whatever, whenever you will get it. And also like that sharpness that you had in life, I don't think went with him in death. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that was a condition of whatever his grief and trauma and loss was here. You know, I don't think it was actually his essence. Although it's really hard to start differentiating that when you have the memories and the experiences you have. But during that time, I could hear his voice in my head a lot. You know, kind of like jokes here and there, comments, things that he might have used to say. And then there was a period where I didn't really hear that at all. And I do think that people talk about that. There's like this, they feel like a lingering for a while, whether it's imagined or real or whatever, a lingering for a while. And then they feel like a nothing for a bit. And depending on where you're at and that relationship you have with that person, it could be fine, or it could be like devastating, like a secondary loss. And so I don't know if you had any of those things. You and mine are with the most recent is still pretty like close to us. So it's hard to have any kind of objectivity at this point, maybe even.
When you say a lingering, what do you mean?
Like once the TV,
or?
yes, like the TV came on and it didn't feel like a presence like, ooh, someone's watching me, but just like, I don't know how else to describe, like if you thought someone was in everything, in the wind, in the things, in the blah, 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 and then you just didn't, like you just.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
Yes, totally. Yeah. I mean, gosh, you know, I think I really, and partly I think I've come to this from watching my mom pass on. I really believe in the like kind of like divine story is like just not that great a word, but like that everyone has their own divine story. And you know, as someone's, you know, child or in any intimate relationship, like, you know, you can see you see a whole person, right? And you see like their strengths and their weaknesses, and maybe after they pass on, you contend with, you know, like the ways in which they were like incredible in their lives to others, to you, and then the ways in which like you wish for things that you didn't get, or that you wish that they'd been different in a certain way. And like when you're healthy and they're healthy and you just think, well, they should know this and I'm going to, and it's like everyone's kind of supposed to figure out what they're supposed to figure out when they're supposed to figure it out. And it's totally not up to you. And it's perfect. Like exactly as it is. Like when you were talking about him having this sharp tongue and how it could be so hurtful. And then you couldn't write a more poetic story that he couldn't use his tongue to say anything hurtful in the end, and what that experience must have been like for him is like, there's nothing you could have done in your lifetime that would have been a bigger teacher for him than the life he lived. And, for me, like sometimes I wish that my mom had been more available to me. And then she got Alzheimer's, which made her totally unavailable to me. And so that was my life's divine order being like, you want her, you want who she really is. I made a choice to be with her and to enjoy her while I could, even though she was unavailable to me. And that was such a gift. It was like an incredible gift. So coming back to the idea about like, it's hard to be mad at someone who you've lost like to death is like, God, this idea is so fresh in my mind. I really want to articulate this. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve you whether they're living or dead. Like ultimately, that phrase, like we all die alone, like I was there with my mom, but like you come in and you go out and you're always with you. Like other people come and go. Even when you're with them, you're with your impression of who they are. Do you know what I mean? So when they die, are you gonna begrudge like the words are coming. This is so fresh, it's all gone. Like it's a story. It's just like, it's in the past, which you could argue is the case with those who are living that you're in relationship with as well. So like, but grief and death, it gives you the opportunity to like to let go. I don't know. To be here. This is it. Like right now, it's all there is. That's all there is.
Right. I think other people on the podcast too have highlighted presence in this moment of like nowness, which is kind of what I hear.
Totally.
Yeah. And what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's pretty deep. I think it's pretty deep. I think the whole subject matter is deep. And it's a shame that it's so hard for us to tolerate the loss and the sadness. And because I think there's so much depth to be had from the whole circumstance. But hey, big wins, big losses. There's something in there. But
I just want to like echo what you said about like aging and mortality. And when you watch someone die or when you lose someone in your life, and also just as you get older and your parents get more feeble and frail, like, like my husband and I joke, like you're getting closer to the plank, like, oh, you're next.
You're walking the plank.
You know what I mean? Like it's coming for all of us, and you should be so lucky if, you get to, we always begrudge aging and like how many years you have. It's like, oh, you should just like be so grateful, right?
Yes, they say aging is a privilege.
I like that.
To grow old is a privilege.
Yeah, and also it is scary to watch someone's like body deteriorate and to consider that that's like that all the people before you who have died lived through the act, like the process of dying. That's intense.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you don't know how that's going to be for you, but yeah, I would like to see our culture be more like embracing and caring for those who are sick and like those who are aging. Like,
Right.
I know the people in our lives are not necessarily always easy to be around, and you know, we live in a culture where it's very individualistic, and you kind of like make your own way, and then you hope you have enough, you know, resources to like have, you know, someone care for you. And but I do feel like, you know, I like I like I intend to honor intergenerationality in my life more. I think that's healthy. If
How do
I
you mean?
Well, I remember just as a kid, like my grandparents were really important
I see.
figures in
Yes.
my life,
Okay.
you know, and like I think I think we tend to banish the elderly a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I think even as a woman, like aging is slightly terrifying because of, you know, more now, but historically there have been fewer female voices, you know, older female voices in the media, which the media is not the truth. You
Right.
know, we all know the people in our lives who've influenced us.
Yes. I mean, it certainly seems like a broadcast message that women aren't really allowed to age.
Well, I mean, I've heard you talk about this before, right? The like
Mm-hmm.
the kind of archetypal roles for females, like
Mm-hmm.
the ingenue, the whore, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like. But I'm also my husband always makes fun of me because I use this word poised a lot, which he
Mm-hmm.
thinks sounds like, you know, moist, and you know, he's always like, "Yo, you're uniquely poised." But I am I'm trying to like I try to put a positive spin on things, which I think I got from my mom, actually. And I am grateful to be the age that I am, because I feel like I have like amassed some wisdom and some life experience. And I've also collected like skills, like a lot of skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one thing that's exciting about being in your mid 40s is that you're living in the kind of convergence of knowing some things. I mean, when I was 30 and 20 and 10, I also was like, I know some shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know a lot, you know. But I know more now.
Mm-hmm.
Not about like what's true, but like about the breadth of emotion and recovery and hardship and healing and endurance. And yeah, being able to like, as a storyteller, you know, to apply that empathy, that well of empathy, to, you know, to my work, to, you know, to being of service, to using the skills, you know, that I've developed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's actually a really cool place. To the connections, you know, like just the contacts. How can I bring people together? And yeah. So sidetrack there, but
No, I love it all.
I
I
think
love it
the
all.
reason why it's related is because that mortality piece is like, what you gonna do with it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like time feels more real.
Mm-hmm.
What you gonna do with it?
Yeah. I have one last question for you. I always say on the podcast, I don't give advice or ask guests to give advice, but I will ask for a suggestion. And you did touch on this earlier, and you might say the same thing. You might say something different. Do you have a suggestion for someone who might be suffering right now, like really in it?
I think of grief as it's like the ocean, and we don't like control it. Like sometimes the waves are really big, sometimes the swell is really strong. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, don't try to control the ocean, like it's futile.
Wise words.
It's also not like tempestual all the time. It's not. So like grab your little raft
and get flung around.
And like while you're getting flung, just be like, I'll just hold on.
Yeah. Wise words. Mēsha, thank you for spending some time and being, so close. I think you're the closest grief person on that I have in my lineup. You're the closest to your most recent loss, and that's like super scary. A lot of the people I have talking have quite a bit of time under their belt, which always makes it kind of a little easier to discuss. So I commend you on your poise and your your ability and your vulnerability and your willingness to talk about a fresh subject. That's not easy. And I can't thank you enough for giving me some of your time. You've given me so much of your time over the last several years. And I'm so thankful for even more of it.
My time. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope I get to keep giving you my time.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Thanks, Jillian.
Thank you.